What would you say is the most rewarding part of your job?
I think it depends which nurse you ask.
In the first sort of initial meeting with them, they say that they would prefer to be in an acute hospital or the hospice setting to die, but actually as they start to recognise the support that can be given to them and provided for their families, they can often change their minds, can't they, and decide that actually I do want to be at home for my end-of-life care.
And has work in a palliative care setting changed your own personal viewpoints on death? Hello, I'm Hannah and welcome to the Life and Loss podcast, where we discuss difficult topics including living with a life-limiting illness, dying, death and bereavement. In this episode of the podcast, we will be joined by two experienced community specialist palliative care nurses who offer invaluable insights into their profession. They share their personal journeys into palliative care and shed light on the complexities of their roles within the community. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
So first of all, how did you get interested in palliative care and the community service?
So my thoughts about it started at a really young age when my grandma looked after her mother at home, and I was able to witness care from district nurses, and then in the same instance I was able to see my gran looked after by community specialist palliative care nurses, and then she ultimately spent her last few days in a hospice. So it stemmed from there, and I saw how rewarding it was and wanted to do that. Tory?
So when I was a student nurse, I spent some time at a different inpatient unit over in Dorset, and just knew instantly that that was kind of the career pathway that I wanted to take. I worked with some absolutely phenomenal nurses and could see the real difference that they made. And obviously we were looking after people and they had their end-of-life care at the hospice, but we also worked alongside the community nurses at that time and saw the kind of efforts and support that they put in and gave to patients and families at home. And again, how rewarding it was for them and enabling people to stay at home for their end-of-life care.
And I imagine for you both that no day is ever the same, but what does a typical day look like for a community palliative care nurse?
So there's 7 of us in our team, and we all hold our own caseload, so we all support patients depending on the GP surgeries. So we work in different localities across the patch. So the days can be really variable, but usually they're extremely busy. So we start the day, we come in and we see whether there's been any calls overnight to the hospice unit from any patients in the community. And then we will follow up on those calls and see if those patients that are phoned in need any support visits from us throughout the day. Then we have our already planned visits, so we'll go out and see patients in their own homes. Those visits can take anything from up to sort of an hour and a half, and we'll be seeing new patients to the caseload on those days as well. We have lots of meetings with GP surgeries and district nursing teams, because obviously we all work really closely together in supporting patients in their own home. And then obviously we spend a lot of time back at the hospice as well. We make a lot of phone calls every day, don't we? And a lot of the time those phone calls aren't planned, so there'll be calls coming through from patients that are needing support with their symptom control management. Sometimes it can be that they've reached a bit of a crisis in their care and we need to support with that. A lot of our day spent with patients and with families, and we often will do quite a lot of bereavement calls or sometimes bereavement visits as well to patients that we've been supporting. And then we obviously work really closely with the ward team at the hospice as well, because you know, sometimes our patients that are in the community need to come in to the hospice setting, so we'll liaise with the teams there to see whether there's a bed available and whether that's an appropriate admission.
Okay. And what's the difference between receiving palliative care in the community versus the hospice itself? And do people tend to have a preference on their place of care?
A preferred place of care and a preferred place of death is very different for everybody. And sometimes families and patients feel that they want the extra security of going into a hospice where there is 24-hour care. We obviously explain to our patients that there's nurses there 24 hours on site, and during working hours there's a doctor present within the unit, and then obviously out of hours there's the doctor on call that the hospice nurses can liaise with. And people like that option because it means that they can be a relative rather than having to provide caring duties. And it could be that that patient doesn't have relatives who are nearby who can provide that care. So the hospice environment works well. But on the flip side of that, people like to have their end-of-life care in their own home. It's their environment, it's their own space. They have enough space for all the relatives to stay. They've got a dog and a cat and they want that comfort, and they want to be able to have friends over, and they can have that within the hospice, but obviously it's their own environment, and there is no right or wrong choice. It's very individual, and we encourage either aspect, but we never say to a patient, once you've made a choice, it has to stay like that. It can evolve with the situation of the patient changing. So some people often say, I want to be at home, but as they become less well, they ask if they can come into the hospice. And if we have a bed available and it's appropriate, we can bring them in.
What teams do you work alongside? I know you've touched on a couple already, but who else do you work with?
So we work alongside a huge amount of teams, so like we call it the multidisciplinary team, and they're all of them are absolutely key in supporting patients in the community. So obviously we work hugely with our district nursing teams, so they become involved when patients perhaps are more imminently dying and needing some hands-on nursing care. So again, that they're vital in the support at home. GPs, obviously the GPs they are the primary responsibility for patients in the community, so we work very closely with them. But also our therapy teams, so occupational therapists, physiotherapists. I work in the Wimborne locality, so we've got the ICRT team who go out and provide patients with personal care when they're in the last sort of 2 to 4 weeks of life. We sometimes work with social services if that's the right thing for patients. So there's lots of other teams, isn't there, that we're very involved with. And again, the hospital palliative care team that are based at the hospice, if we've got a patient that's been admitted to the acute sector, then I'll be asking them to review that patient in hospital to make sure that they're getting the right support and the right care and everything that's appropriate for them.
What would you say is the most rewarding part of your job?
I think it depends which nurse you ask and why we went into the role, but ultimately being able to provide somebody comfort is a reward, and being able to alleviate any fears or myths surrounding what the dying process entails and how it unfolds, because everybody's read books or seen stories or read magazines and may not have lived through it, and they often have misconceptions. So if we can help with their thought process and their feelings and provide comfort, it is rewarding. And often we get the feedback from the relatives saying how happy they were that their loved one either died at home or in the hospice and was surrounded by their loved ones and had good symptom management as well. That's the feedback we need, and that's rewarding.
Yeah.
I hope that you are finding this episode useful. Perhaps you have a question you'd like to ask. You can do this by commenting below. Your input shapes the conversations we have and the topics that we explore. So don't hesitate to reach out and let us know what you'd like to hear more of.
And on the flip side of that, so a lot of people say, I don't know how they do it. It must be such a tough job, seeing such sad circumstances all the time. There must be elements of the job that are really challenging for you. How do you cope with that?
There are lots of elements that are really challenging. I think often if we're looking after patients and families that are similar ages to us, or have got children the same age as our children, or the family situation is really similar, there are times when it can be really, really emotionally draining for us to support them. But actually we've got amazing support as our team. We're a small team, but we're all really close, and we all kind of really keep an eye out on each other, know when perhaps we've got patients on our caseload that are really challenging or really emotionally difficult, and we kind of really support each other when we come back from those visits. We kind of call our office our sort of safe space, don't we? And we're very good at kind of offloading and talking things through as a team. We have monthly clinical supervision. So we have a trained psychologist that comes in and spends some time with us once a month to talk through those difficult situations and help us kind of process those in our minds as kind of what's been going on. But we do a lot of socialising as well as a team, and that definitely helps.
What sort of fears do people have at end of life, or myths? What myths are there as well that you were mentioning?
Some of the myths are that they can't stay at home and that they have to go into hospital. And there's a lot of fear around going into hospital now post-COVID, that loved ones can't be with them, and that it can be quite isolating. And obviously one of the biggest fears we have is that people will die with a symptom uncontrolled, pain for example, and we obviously work with them to address their pain throughout our support network with them, and we aim to have people symptom free or living well with the symptoms they have, and often people don't realise that, and they get comfort in that, and that helps with the dying process and the acceptance of what is going to come or what could happen.
Yeah. Do you have any patients that are particularly memorable, or any experiences that stand out for you?
I think it's always the younger patients for me that stand out. I think we're starting to support a lot more patients that are what we call transitioning, so from paediatric care over to adult care, and we're working really closely now with the paediatric teams to help support that patient and those families. And I think they are definitely, for me, patients that really stand out, because they're very young and their needs are quite different to someone, say, that might be in their sort of 50s, 60s, 70s. You know, when we're talking about looking after someone that's 18, 19, they're going to have quite different needs, and that can be emotionally really difficult for us as a team to support, but we do it, and I think we do it well. But yeah, they're definitely people that kind of stand out to me. And I think it's always as well those patients perhaps where they've been so fearful about their end of life and perhaps how that's going to be for them. And in the first sort of initial meeting with them, they say that they would prefer to be in an acute hospital or the hospice setting to die. But actually, as they start to recognise the support that can be given to them and provided for their families, they can often change their minds, can't they, and decide that actually I do want to be at home for my end of life care. And that's really rewarding, because you know that you've helped them with that kind of thought process and brought about the desire to stay at home.
And has working in a palliative care setting changed your own personal viewpoints on death?
I think it has, and I think for some of us it might have been more eye-opening or more transitioning, as it were. Everybody dies differently. Nobody ever dies the same, and nobody ever has the same process of what someone is going through. Some people come from big families and some people come from very small families. Some people have a support network and others don't. And ultimately, it's the privilege of being able to support that person that gives you an insight on how well it can be done and how wrong it could go, and how you want to avoid the latter and promote the former. And we know that we do a good job, and we know it can be done well, and that is always with us when we're talking to new patients and or we're supporting our colleagues through a loss, and we know it can be done right. So it does change your aspect and your outlook.
Do you also work closely with the oncology teams?
We do, and obviously a lot of the patients we see have already been on quite a journey with the oncology team, and I think it's really important for our patients and families to know that actually we still have a really strong connection with the oncology team, and often it's really important that we liaise with them, because there may be some support or treatments that oncology can offer to help alleviate some of the symptoms that patients may be getting. So actually we have a lot of communication still with the oncology team.
And Tory, is there anything about your job that surprised you along the way?
I think just that, I'd say before I came into this role, I was working as a community district nurse, because that was a stepping stone to getting to this role. And I think just the challenges of community working, I think, are constantly a surprise. I think that we're working very autonomously. We're out in people's homes, and we are the only healthcare professional there with that patient at that time. So I think it's sometimes how we might miss that kind of team around us when we're out in the community. But then it's reassuring to know that everyone's just a sort of phone call away should we need them. And I think just the fact that I still really enjoy the role as much as I did 10 years ago when I started. I think not a day goes by when I think how lucky I am to come to work every day and have a job that I really, really enjoy. I think that's quite a fortunate feeling to have. I think not many people can say that.
Absolutely. So what would you say then, Sarah, to someone who's considering a career in community palliative care?
Go for it. Just ultimately go for it. I moved 300 miles for this job. I relocated my husband twice for this job, and it isn't a job for everybody. We have to acknowledge that, but it is a job for people who have empathy and kindness and love and the willingness to learn and develop, because this role is ever developing and it's ever changing, and you get so much reward from it, but you get friendship and camaraderie and memories that will last your lifetime and experiences you will never forget.
Thank you so much, both of you. Thank you for listening to the Life and Loss podcast by Forest Holme Hospice Charity. If you'd like more information on our work, you can visit our website, which is www.foresthomehospice.org.uk. Thank you.
If you found this episode useful, click the subscribe button. Share this episode with a friend or a loved one, and don't forget to give us a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support means so much.